Thank you very much for having me. I apologize that I'm speaking in English. Of that whole thing, I understood Facebook, Google, fake news, and time well spent, and those are the things that I really got from that. So as she mentioned, I got my start in this on the social media branding side of things. And when social media, when Facebook was first a thing, Budweiser was saying, hey, what stories should we tell? And I found a couple of things really worked. And the first was extreme statements. Budweiser is the greatest beer, the best beer. Did a whole lot better than here's how Budweiser is made. And the other thing is putting ideas in front of people that they already believe, preaching to the choir. If you show a bunch of people who like to have a drink, people having a drink on a Friday, that does pretty well. And it's not such a big deal what companies like Facebook are doing, or companies like Budweiser are doing on Facebook. That doesn't affect the world much. But in around 2014, as Facebook started really heavily pushing news on their platform, I started to notice that news organizations were doing the same things that I was doing at Facebook, changing the content of their headlines to be a little bit more extreme, to preach to their choirs just a little bit more than they'd been doing in the past. And all of us, to some extent, changing the very stories that we tell based on what works in that Facebook algorithm. And so when Facebook did push to moving into a lot more news, something really started to shift in that algorithm. And something tends to happen when we start to look at what does this whole system do to any sort of news or information distribution idea. When an algorithm is figuring out what should we put in front of 2 billion people's minds, what is the perfect next story that we can show you, there tends to be a trend towards those extremism ideas and putting ideas in front of people they already believe. So I'm going to use some American examples here. But leading up to the election, there's a researcher named Zeynep Tufekci who was researching these movements, and she went to one of the Trump movements, and then she went home and tried to watch the YouTube video a couple times. And she found that she was recommended very quickly from Trump videos into white supremacy videos with increasing orders of extremism very, very quickly. And it's not just on the extreme right, extreme left, really on all ideas. If you were to watch Bernie Sanders videos or Hillary Clinton videos, you'd be pushed towards the conspiracy left. And there's this natural tilt that these algorithms tend to have that push ideas towards their extremes. And you might think, well, this is just politics, but it's actually not. It's everything. It's these algorithms figuring out human behavior and acting accordingly. For some teenagers, when they're looking at dieting videos, they're very quickly pushed to anorexia videos. If you're looking up trying to be a vegetarian, it very quickly will push you over towards veganism. As Zeynep says, it's like you're never hardcore enough for YouTube. And you might think like, well, not me, and this is them, this is those other people, and how much of this really is happening. But about 70% of YouTube's traffic is algorithmically recommended. 70% of the trillions of views that are happening, about 70% of those are coming from within this system. And the chief product officer at YouTube said recently that YouTube's average watching session on mobile lasts more than 60 minutes because of what our recommendation engines are putting in front of you. Some of you might relate to thinking, oh, I know I've gotten sucked into the YouTube hole before in the past, but this time it's going to be different. And still waking up an hour later not understanding that that's the case. And it's not just YouTube, this is Facebook. This whole system has this natural bent to it. And it's, again, very easy to say, this is happening to those people, those other people who just don't get it. And if they understood what we get, then they would get it. But this is not those other people. This is me, this is you. Many people in this room, our extreme version of the world, that the world is crumbling, is the way that technology has influenced our society. That's my bubble. That's the one that I'm being pushed towards the extremes of in that idea. But all of us, whatever your mind is most susceptible to believe, over the past couple of years, you have been slowly pushed towards a more extreme idea of that. Even if you shut all the screens off, even if you say, you know what, I'm not getting my news from Facebook or YouTube or any of these things. Chances are, if you're watching TV, so many people trying to keep their finger on the pulse, they're following these same systems. And if you shut it all off together, you're probably talking to other people, and other people tend to be falling into these systems. It's almost impossible to escape the way this has tilted the world. And journalism tends to bend to this environment, right? We talked a little bit about changing those headlines and changing those stories in a way that honestly has happened throughout all of time. But it's changed a little bit more as this system has come into play where so much digital, algorithmically focused content has impacted it. I want to focus on this slide for a little bit here. Because you have any sort of story, Bob does a thing. The world reacts to that thing. And these are from Tobias Rose Stockwell, who thinks really beautifully on this topic. And all of a sudden, now that we have this digital system, we can test individually, we can A/B test, as many of you are so familiar with, so many aspects of that story. What is the headline? What is the subtitle? What is the photo? And it is almost impossible with the business models that are set up to not lean a little bit more into what works. So when what works is a little bit more extremism and putting ideas in front of people that they already believe, that's naturally what comes out of these systems. And what's so shocking to me is that no matter what happens in today's society, this is definitely true in America, I'm not sure how true it is in Germany, but I have a sense it will be true of the world, is that no matter what event comes out, you have these whole clans and sections of people and news articles and publications that will frame that event in exactly the way that fits your worldview already. So Bob does a thing. Can you believe what Bob did? Or watch Bob crush the opposition while doing this thing. Or people suffer while Bob does that thing. It doesn't matter what happened. They're going to have the division and the extremism on both sides of what happened. And then if that weren't sort of enough, all of a sudden we have Russia or other strange foreign actors or domestic actors with agenda that pour gasoline on this fire. You might have seen the Wired story recently talking about how much bots drive the conversation during news events. In general, the way that this works is a thing happens, you have certain voices that are then elevated by thousands or hundreds of thousands of bots. That starts to trend or get a lot of attention. As human beings, we see, wow, this has a lot of attention. It must be a real thing. Real people join into that conversation, and then all of a sudden it spirals. And so something that was recently launched that I would love for this community to be aware of is called factcheck.me. This is something that allows journalists to sort of check in and see, oh, of this public conversation happening online, X percentage is actually driven by bot conversation. So recently, some of these in in America, we found that like some of these shootings had about 25% of the conversation online driven by bots. So it's very hard as journalists, when we're trying to follow movements and what's going on in the world, to really have a good sense of what's a real movement and what's not when it's so easily amplified this way. And then things start to trend, and Twitter is sorry for listing kill all Jews as a trending topic. It is scary that things like this can so quickly rise and be escalated by bots into the conversation. And then, of course, this is only going to get worse as deep fakes come. Which of these 4 videos of Obama or photos of Obama was created by a deep fake? Take a second, try to figure it out, and then realize that they are all deep fakes. So really, this is only going to be harder and harder to decipher what is reality and what information we can trust. So our responsibility in the journalistic community becomes even more and more important to really get this right over the next couple of years. And so this slide might seem like a left turn. The idea of can we build AI without losing control over it? This is from Sam Harris's TED Talk. And you have an ant being stepped on by a construction worker, being stepped on by a giant robot foot. And if you look at intelligence this way, as computational power, in some ways robots or artificial intelligence is already outperforming us, in other ways it's not. And we don't go out of our way to harm ants. In fact, in some cases, we might take care not to harm them. We might pick them up and move them out of harm's way. But the moment their goals interfere with our goals, for example, they want to be there and we want to build on an anthill, we annihilate them without question. And already the goals of the system are not the same as our goals. We don't wake up in the morning and say, how much time can I spend on Facebook today? How much time can I spend on YouTube today? The goals are not aligned. And in that way, I think we've actually lost the first battle to AI. And so Tristan Harris, who's the founder of this Time Well Spent movement, talks about how the only form of ethical persuasion is that exists when the goals of the persuader is aligned with the goals of the persuadee. And so if we can think about that, how do we align the goals in this system? And so I want to give a couple of tips on creating mindful digital experiences as we move into the next phase towards solutions. A lot of these are not going to be media examples. The media example is a really hard one, but I want to inspire this type of thinking. So the first is to honor on and off-screen possibilities. So much of what we can literally measure happens on screen, and for that reason, that's all we've measured and all that we've optimized for. But most meaning happens off screens. And so as we're designing digital products and as we're building our own products, can we really be thinking about, of all of the choices in this person's world, sometimes the best answer is maybe call your mom and not do something on a screen. Can we actually think about what are the other possibilities that are around us that might not necessarily be on the screen, and can we empower those choices too? And the second, in terms of how automation is concerned, processes exist to help people and not the other way around. This one is extremely important. It's so easy to have people get caught into the system and become part of a thing that is feeding this system. And we're getting so good at persuading people and grabbing and holding people's attention that it's important that we really take a second thought about, are the systems that we're creating and we're automating, are they actually in service of people, or are people in service of the machine? It's a really important distinction. And then finally, that people come to apps or sites for deeply personal reasons. And that's the way that you win. The way that we succeed is meeting those reasons, not clicks or buys or views or subscriptions. And this is really hard because, especially in advertising models, so much of our success is measured in clicks and buys and views and subscriptions. But what if we could reimagine what that might look like? So can we measure our success differently? And so we started to see, and also with screen time and digital wellness programs, certain apps trying to measure their success and how well they get us off of these apps or platforms. And that's one thing that's interesting. It's even more interesting to me, the apps that deliver the value and then immediately get you off of screen. So, things like these transportation or delivering food or putting people to jobs, you get that value and immediately disconnect. But what's even more interesting to me is really thinking about human values and actually measuring success that way. So Meetup is measuring their success by helping create 1 million hours of people connecting in real life every day. And it's one thing to say these, it's another to really measure their success that way. Calm helps create calm and stress-free time in your day and reduce anxiety. It's a meditation app. uBlock helps each user reclaim 30 to 40% of their attention across the internet. Flux helps people reclaim 15 minutes of quality sleep every day. Asana helps people become 45% more efficient in teams at work. Hinge helps users spend 80% less time swiping and 5% more time on conversations. A lot of dating apps measure their success in swipes. Duolingo helps each user learn a university semester's worth of language in 34 hours of use. Tribute, which is an app that helps you create video montages for people you care about, boasts an 87% tears of joy ratio. What would a world look like where Facebook, where YouTube, where Google, where all of us were actually measuring their success, measuring our success based on how well we really brought people value? I think it would look a lot different than it looks today. And I want to give one more example here.
If you're like me, you've too often been sitting at an airport or crammed onto a middle seat of a plane at some horrid hour, either late at night or early in the morning, and you're thinking to yourself, why didn't I just spend those extra $40 on that other flight? We like to think that we're making conscious choices, but when we're all in a rush, the more we rely on the menus in front of us. Hipmunk is a travel website that recognized this, and they let you sort choices by human values. It's not just price or duration, but they let you sort by agony. They do this because they ask themselves, what is sorting for a price or duration about? It's not just about the raw numbers, it's about the human experience and values behind travel. So it's important to ask ourselves, what are the human values at stake in this choice? Another example where technology can help us live by our values could be when you're looking for directions from point A to point B. Of course we know we could walk, but what if, since you've told your phone in your settings that you've been wanting to exercise, it put a choice on life's menu that said, or you could walk, and here's the fitness goal you could achieve by doing so. Or maybe in your settings, instead of valuing exercise, you've said you valued productivity, so it offers up a podcast you might like to finish in that time. 28 minutes left in the podcast, 30-minute walk, it's on your team. There could be menus that sort choices by what matters to you. We can upgrade the goal from getting to point A to point B efficiently to getting from point A to point B well. And remember, no one decides what well means to you but you. What if technology was on your team to help you live by your values?
And so we made that about 3-4 years ago.
Seat of a plane. Why didn't I think that we're making conscious choices?
Can we go to the next slide?
Rely on the menus in front of us.
We made this about 3-4 years ago, and it's been great to see the beginnings of Facebook, Google, Apple, of companies starting to address digital wellness. But like in this room, I wonder what that looks like in the media environment. Can we start to create different platforms or different sites that are really thinking about users differently? Because we have a bit of a media crisis on our hands. What would it look like if somebody's trying to live more generously? What would it look like to give that person news? What is the purpose of news anymore? It used to be that we were information scarce, and news organizations could deliver that. Now we have so much information that it's kind of our job to filter. And how can we filter in a way that actually respects and understands people's lives and empowers them? that collectively helps us focus on the things that are most important to us? Can we rethink what that actually looks like? And can we create a world where technology helps us live by our values and not on our screen time? Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much, Max.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, the Ignite format is meant for each of our speakers to have exactly 12 minutes so that we have some time left for questions.
Got
so
it.
if there are any questions, please just raise your hand. We have microphones in the room. One question that came to my mind, because you warned me ahead, you said, Eva, I'm going to be critical of the platforms. Is that okay? And we were like, yes, that's okay. But what do you think could be incentives to set for them to make it more like value-driven, as you just said?
Sure. I think the advertising model is really challenging here because so long as time and profits are going together, it's very difficult to really to really help people live by their values. But I would be very willing to pay for a version of Facebook that were working really hard to understand me and my values and then help serve me content or serve me opportunities accordingly. I would be very willing to pay for those products. I would not pay for any social networks as they exist right now. So it requires real systems change. I think it's not like flip a switch or just pay to remove the ads. We need to think about, as users, can we pay for products that are really bringing us that kind of life value and enhancement? That's what technology can and should be, right? If it's not enhancing our lives, why do we want this thing in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Any more questions from the audience? Or do we still need to wake them up? There.
Yeah, hello. I'm not quite sure if I understood what you thought you discover as new things on Facebook. You said that it was that people would like to read their own opinion that they have already, I think. And the other one was that headlines that are going to more extreme attract more attention, but isn't that something that is well known for 100 years from the yellow press? I mean, what are the new aspects that you found there?
Absolutely. Many of the problems coming here are not new. Many of these problems have been going on for centuries. What's different is the amount of gas that was poured on this fire, in the sense that now we are testing billions of data points for your brain specifically. What is the exact thing that your mind would push to the extreme? And so it becomes, for 2 billion people at scale, what does the world look like when 2 billion people are pushed towards extreme views and their own extreme view?
Any reaction to that? Or here's another question.
Doesn't it mean that the apps have to collect even more data from me, like personal data that I don't want to share? Or, I'm pretty concerned of that, or that I can't decide what I really want because the apps know me better than I do?
Sure. 2 things on that. One, great question. And absolutely, it would be very scary to just give that kind of personal data over to Facebook. I don't really trust Facebook to do that right now. We probably need a new class of companies and organizations that we have more trust with to do something like what I'm talking about. But also, we have this idea of am I going to trust these other things to know me better than I know myself? And unfortunately, this is what's happening anyway. The companies do know us better than we know ourselves, and we're going to be pushed in one direction. And the direction that we're pushed in when we don't make this choice is really not good. It's all the most base aspects of our human behavior, and that's what rises to the top. So we do start to have to make hard questions start to ask ourselves hard questions of am I willing to be persuaded by this company in this way? But in my opinion, it's better. It's going to happen either way, and it's better than the alternative.
And another question from Stefan here in the first row.
Let's take a look into your personal life. How do you spend your time well? Do you get any rules with your friends? Do you giving yourself a hard time if you're doing too much social media? What is your recommendation to us?
So because I've spent so much time on this, my friends just more start to feel guilty around me if they're using their phones a lot. But yeah, I make a very conscious effort to do this a little bit differently. From the literally using my phone regard, some of the things that have been most effective for me, physical alarm clocks are $8 on Amazon. Not using your phone as your alarm so that when you wake up, the first thoughts that you put in your brain are not everything that you're behind on from the day before. And also turning off all notifications that are not from a human being that's trying to reach you. No, this person has liked your photo. Happy holidays from Tinder. You haven't played Candy Crush in a while. All of those notifications are algorithmically generated, looking at you, subject 62847B. If we send you a notification at this time, there's a pretty good likelihood that you'll come back. And so those are some good ones, but we need sort of more social constructs that allow us to have healthier relationships with this overall.
What about meditation apps like Headspace? Do you use them?
Sure, I use Insight Timer is mine, which I like quite a lot. And then also, like, one thing that I want to share is, like, a lot of things. One thing my friends talk about is what creates a meaningful life. How do we live the most fully and meaningfully? And so I've found things of, like, from men's groups to, like, strange retreats and strange dinner activities, like those types of things. I would love for technology to help surface more options for us, things that we would later rate as, like, wow, that was an incredibly meaningful experience. So, like, it's easy to think about this in terms of tips and tricks on our phones, but what does the world look like when we're looking at the whole picture and really thinking about what creates that meaning, what creates that value, and how do we optimize that? How do we bring more of that to people's lives? And how do we do that in a way where we're not giving all of our data to people we don't trust?
Well, Max, you're going to be with us again after the workshops
Yes.
to give some impulses into the panel in the evening. So if you have any questions left, there's going to be another opportunity. You're also going to be with us for the whole day. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.